Shalom, shalom, everybody. Ariel Bar Tzadok here from the Kosher Torah School, found online at www.koshertorah.com. We are presently in a series of classes, a new course. We began last week actually for us, and it is on the topic of the classical Kabbalah, the pre-Lurianic, and even the pre-Cordoveran teachings of the original mystical schools. Mind you, not of the prophetic and or magical schools, but the metaphysics, if you will. Now, the original schools of understanding Kabbalah at this time, this book that we're dealing with called Ohel Moed, was written in 1559 by Rabbi Yosef Menachem in Egypt. And by that time, Moshe Cordovero did write the Pardes Rimonim, his famous, Pardes Rimonim, the Garden of the Pomegranates, but it wasn't published for a little while yet. So this book actually came first, and it's a very, very little known book. It's not very popular. It's not one of the big ones that anybody really ever learns. I've been asked by a number of our religious students, where can you find the book? And I have to say the truth, I don't think it's available anymore. Here's its cover. It's called Sifrei Mekubalim HaKadmonim, and it's got 3 books in it. One here, which is attributed to the students of, if not the teachings of the Ramban Nachmani himself. Another one here called Sefer Devikut, and down here below are Ohel Moed. So, at our Kosher Torah School, you should know, I don't teach what everybody else is teaching. I don't believe that we need to be so redundant. There are tremendous other rabbis and teachers out there teaching all kinds of things. For those of you who are interested in the teachings of Hasidut, there are a number of rabbis out there teaching Hasidut. For teaching Kabbalah, well, depending on your level, your orientation, there are other rabbis out there teaching Kabbalah as well. Some better, some worse, whatever. I say that with trepidation because Kabbalah today has become such a littered field. You have, unfortunately, so many people out there who are teaching Kabbalah, let's be honest, almost like a cult. And that's a really problem. You got to believe their way and only their way and whatever. No. For those who think that Kabbalah is just this exclusive philosophical way of looking at the world, no. As you will see, from everything we teach here at our Kosher Torah School, we teach the prophetic Kabbalah, which is experiential Kabbalah. What are you experiencing? You're going to say the presence of God? Well, let me tell you this. Not even the angels above experience the, in quote, presence of God, whatever that means. We're going to talk actually about some of that tonight in this class. Because this lesson 2 now in our series, just began last week, if you remember, is going to address the topic of creation and how God brought about the world. Now, before you yawn, gee whiz, what does that have to do with me? All right? It's kind of like long time ago. En contraire. All right? Lehefech. The real issue, and this is a point that's made here in the Ohel, and a point that's even elaborated even further by Chaim Vital, ballpark about 20 to 50 years later. And that is everything that you and I and we as human beings understand about creation. Everything that we will ever understand about reality. How's that? Exists in a bubble. Or, if you will allow me to use the words of Rabbi Chaim Vital, exists within an igul, a sphere. And these are the igulim, the spheres of reality. Now, before you start getting all weird on me, says, what does all that stuff mean? Let's remember what I just said. Everything that we know is a reflection of and a reflection within us, human consciousness. So whenever we look at the world, we're going to see it through human eyes. Our humanity is not limited to this crude matter of our physical bodies. As good old Master Yoda would have taught us, luminescent beings are we. Fine. We know that we are beings of light. But even our beings of light are still human. Or, using the Hebrew word, Adam. Granted, from our present point of view in this limited physical body, we are what's called nephesh, consciousness. And I deal with levels of consciousness in other areas. I don't want to get into it too much here. Our higher self is what we call neshama consciousness. And the neshama consciousness is what taps us into and connects us to the higher dimensional realities within which we live and are living right now, but we're unaware of. So, for example, I am right now in the office of my home. Outside of my office, there are other rooms in this house. There is a kitchen, there is a living room, there is a garage, there's a bathroom, and all of these rooms are existing simultaneously right now to this one. But needless to say, I don't see them. I am in the bedroom, or the office, if you will. Okay? Now, what does that mean? That I would have to leave my office to find out what's happening in the bathroom, in the kitchen, in the living room, etc. That's common sense, right? Okay. Well, we have as easy access as I have to the other rooms in my house. Our soul has easy access to the other dimensions in which we live, equal to us moving around the physical house. We access those other dimensions through the meditative plane and everything that we teach, etc. But no matter where I go, no matter what I see, higher dimensions, lower dimensions, this house or the heavenly house, they're all going to be seen through my own eyes. Granted, the physical world will be seen through these physical peepers here. And once we pass beyond the limitations of the flesh, you'll see with your, in quote, spiritual eyes. In our Sha'arei Kiddusha course, Rab Chaim elaborated for us that to each and every part of the physical body, there corresponds an equal and higher part of what we call the astral body, or what he calls the Chalukah D'Rabbanan. You remember very well where it says in the Torah that we are created in the image of God. What is that image? Now, you can say spiritually that it's the same image as our eyes and ears and nose and mouth. And in a way, that's true, but that's not physical. God, as the foundation of our Torah faith, has no form, no visual form, it's not physical. So therefore, to think that the image that we are created in is physical is fundamentally flawed. The Kabbalists will say that we're created in the image of the 10 Sefirot. And you all know the 10 Sefirot, those 10 little balls. You got the one, 4 in the center, and then the 3 in the opposite columns there. You've seen the diagram. Google the Sefirot if you don't know what they are, and you'll see the diagrams. But is that the real order? Well, Rab Chaim, 50 years after this, he elaborated in great detail the difference between the spheres, which he called Igulim, and the Yosher, or the columns of the Sefirot. Now, this is a little bit more than just metaphysical psychobabble. There is something really significant here. And being that our emphasis in our school, of course, has always been experience, the prophetic Kabbalah, I will always take the theoretical and make it realistic and practical so that you can understand the significance of what the heck we're talking about, why we're even talking about it in the first place. Because we live in a real world, and our real world is always going to be a reflection of what we know to be real. Now, here is the big deal. We live on this earth with the delusion, and it is a delusion, that we are the prime species on this planet. Doesn't it say in Genesis that Elohim said, you shall rule over all the animals and blah, blah, blah? Yes, it does. And whether or not we've abdicated said rule, we still dominate the face of this earth, as you know. We build mighty civilizations in every corner, and we dominate, and we crush, and we mow down, and we destroy. Mother Nature took thousands of years to grow and expand the Amazon jungle, but our might takes it and slices it down piece by piece. We show Mother Nature who is boss, right? We create all kinds of technological terrors with our wisdom and knowledge. And we show nature who's boss. We take all of our trash. We throw it on the bottom of the ocean. We throw it into landfills. So what if we pollute the air and poison the water? It's ours to control. We'll do as we choose, right? I feel like that's the maniacal, laugh of the evil villain. You really think that humanity is going to get away with this? People have always said that we have enough power with our technological weapons of war to destroy the planet. No, you don't. You won't even scratch the planet. If we were to literally launch all of our nukes, thousands of them, we might wipe out the human race. That's true. But there are ways to get around nuclear war, and literally in a matter of a couple of years, you should be kind of almost back to normal. I mean, if you've never read Kearney's Nuclear War Survival Skills, which was written, 30, 40 years ago. Yeah, it's all in there. So if any of you are of that survivalist mentality and you want to check that stuff out, it's not a bad idea, just so you can have a little touch of reality. But anyway, getting back to our business here. Why is it important to discuss? We talk about our abuse of nature, and Mother Nature is not going to allow us to mess her up. Just remember this. Our human race is just a little itsy bitsy part of life on this planet and inside this planet. Yes, you might think we are the highest indigenous race in this world. Ha, ha, ha. There are others here, I use a word, you see I'm mumbling here. They're higher than us, but what does that word higher mean? There are energetic beings that actually live in the air. Yes, there are. Some see them as ball lightning or orbs. You see them in planes. You see them all over the place. They're there. But they're higher than us too. But what I mean by higher isn't such a place in physicality. What I mean is that they're in a different dimensional reality. They live in a four-dimensional, physical fourth dimension that we don't. And as such, they are of a different physical nature than are we. And as such, they have abilities in their dimensional reality that we just don't. That doesn't make them closer to God. It doesn't make them holier or more righteous or more pure or blah or anything. They are what they are. And you say they're the demons. Not necessarily. Really, we don't share the myth that is embraced by our brother and sister Christians in that respect. There are all kinds of ruhot and neshamot and malachim of all different kinds, all over the place. They're there. And they exist within their context. And here's the big difference. As you all know, I am a dog lover. I've always had dogs and I always will. They're not my pets. Don't you dare call my dogs my pet. They're my children. And I don't care if you like that or not. They're my canine children. You don't like it, I don't care. But I'm going to tell you something about having my dogs. They have a very different consciousness than I do. Oh yeah, they have feelings and they have thoughts. I could say when Tex was alive, God rest his soul, right? Gosh, I'd had conversations that I knew he could understand. And some semblance, some Sierra. See, she's behind the little divider here, behind there. If you remember our Kosher Torah School shirt there, that's for those who are gracious enough to support our school, sending us a one-time donation of $180. I send you one of these Kabbalistic amulet-style T-shirts. Yeah, you can wear your blessings. That's what it's all about. It's actually very cool. I have one on, you can see. And I'll tell you something. I don't believe in magic. No, I don't. But this, when you activate this with your emunah, with your faith, I won't say any more. My dogs see the world in their own consciousness. And I learn from them that their sight and their perception, right? If the dog was to say God created me, they would think that the image of God's like the heavenly dog. Like we make the mistake of thinking God is the heavenly man. Now, here is the big thing, especially Reb Chaim later, and we're going to see here, there is a pattern for the universe as we perceive it. Okay? Our author opens up here. All right, and he states like this, all right? And rather than read every single word, I'm going to paraphrase a lot. He says, when God arose to create the worlds, all right? With desire, all right? Pure just will create the world, right? He didn't have to do it. There was nothing forcing him, nothing to compel. There's nothing other, there's no need. As nitkala v'nitpashet or rishon. Then comes the revelation of what's called this first light. Me'etzem ziv kivodo. From the radiance of his glory. All right? And he makes a statement that there was no lack from the original light and nothing necessarily new in the other light. It's just an emanation. And I've asked people, what do you think it means to emanate? Emanation, like you'd say that's the rays of the sun. Is the ray of the sun really the sun? No, it's not. The concept of emanation, or the Hebrew word is atzilut, that becomes a big word in later Kabbalah. But the point here, rather than play around with words, is that our author states that within this light which materialized first, the manifest from the unmanifest, and in it were 9 other lights. Remember, 10 is the big number for Kabbalah, the 10 Sefirot, etc., and so on. You know all the important numbers that we have in our Torah tradition. You see the number 4 repeated many a time. 7, obviously. 12, obviously, right? 12 tribes, 12 months, 12 signs of the zodiac, 4 letters of Yud Kei Vav Kei, 4 letters of Ekyeh, 4 letters of Adonai, all right? 7 Shabbats, 7 Shemitot, 7, over and again. Okay, 7 years for the Shemitah. So you see these numbers, but 10 pops up again all the time as well. Now, we've discussed what we call the 10 Sefirot, the 10 divine emanations, which becomes the pattern of creation. 10, not 9. 10, not 11. That's a quote from the Sefer Yetzirah. But a point that we made in earlier Sefer Yetzirah classes, the concept and understanding of what is the Sefirot is very different from the olden schools to the newer schools. Sefirot are energy patterns. Within the original is everything. We said that the original, the first light, again, later Kabbalah calls it Keter, which is the emanation of pure will, desire. You, remember Rene Descartes, the famous philosopher who says, I think, therefore I am. You forgive me that I can't quote it in the original. Ergo sum nom, something like that. If you know the language, you want to put it in the text there, I'll read it. Believe that there. But anyway, I think, therefore I am. Well, let me tell you something. I always said this to Monsieur Descartes, all right? You are whether you think or not. Because there's a part of you and I which is above thought. Now, let's put life, our lives, into a context. Think about yourself. Think about all of your ideas, your dreams, your accomplishments. Let's say you are a significant contributor to human society. You are a dreamer, a visionary, an artist, a scientist, a musician. You've done something major significant to improve the world. Well, let's go back to your beginnings. And this is something that the rabbis, our sages, tell us to always remember. Where do you come from? It says you come from putrid seed. Now, hopefully we're all adults. I'm sure most of us are married. All right? We all know what a seminal, thank you, cognito ergo sum. Thank you. Now, we all know what a seminal emission looks like. We know what comes out, the seminal fluids from the male body. Right? It's like a little icky, sticky stuff. That's you. That's me. That's where we all come from, that little itsy bitsy sticky stuff. Right? The stuff that you wipe off with a rag and you go, ooh. Out of that, inside that, is the mind of an Einstein, the wisdom of Da Vinci, the creativity of a Tesla, of a Michelangelo, and the holiness of a Moshe Rabbeinu, of a Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Right, that little itsy bitsy sticky stuff. All came from there. We call that, as you know, seed, and it is Keter. Because inside that is everything to come. You go outside and look at a big tree, all right? You know that tree starts with an itsy bitsy little seed, that little itsy bitsy. Now, if I cut open that seed and I open up, there's no little tree in there, but there's a formula. There is a recipe. There is DNA, and it's a code, and everything comes after another, boom, 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 and it creates all this stuff. Now, I don't know about you, I think that's pretty intense. I think that's pretty cool, right? As you know, I'm a man not so young anymore. Years and years and years ago, when my mom and dad, God rest their souls, got together, and they had their yichud, and I was the result of that yichud, I'm pretty sure at the time of that insemination, my mom and dad were not thinking that they're going to create a child who's going to become a rabbi, who's going to study the Kabbalah, who's going to be there years later talking on the social media to teach people the way of experiential Torah. Pretty sure that wasn't in my mom and dad's thoughts. But in that little itsy bitsy stuff that came out, there it was. It was all there. That's the first light. Now, why is this important for us to remember? Because when you want to look around this big world of ours, and you want to thump your chest and say, I'll stick it to nature. I'll show the world I'm the boss here. I'll do whatever the blankety blank I want. I'll define and decide what is right and wrong. I'll define and decide what is natural and unnatural. I'll put things in the place that I want them to be. Oh, you will you? You think so? You're going to take the code that exists in everything, and you're going to slap it in the face. And you think you're going to do so with impunity, because there is no code. There is no God. There is no real validity to any of this. That's what some say. But you know something? If you go to those people who are going to say what they're going to say, and you just say, gee whiz, aren't you from like the same DNA as the rest of us? But of course. So there is a pattern. But of course. And you can't go messing with patterns. But of course. And there is kind of something like natural law, right? Nature, natural laws. But of course. This is the secularist, atheist talking still. And then you scratch your head and say, gee whiz, you acknowledge that there is this natural law, and yet you think you can violate the law with impunity. Doesn't work like that now, does it? To paraphrase, the rabbi says, after the first light came out with 9 in it, the pattern. The second light came out with 8 in it. The third light came out with 7 in it. And then they all come out. Now, in Rabbi Chaim Vital's description in his later works, where he calls this the spheres, he says you have the big sphere, and then concentric spheres going down and down and down and down and down. Now, as you know, Rabbi Chaim has a profound concept that the earlier Kabbalists never had. And that was the concept of the tzimtzum, the withdrawal of the original light so as to make a space for existence to exist. Now, that's always been such a controversial topic amongst the later Kabbalists who debate these things. Why? Because they say place, that can't be taken literally, can it? Is the what we call tzimtzum, kepshuto or lo kepshuto. That's a big argument amongst the philosophical Kabbalists. You know something? It doesn't matter, because it's not going to make a difference to you and me. But what does make a difference to you and me is to recognize that there is a pattern to the world. And the pattern that exists, get this now, you and I know nothing of it. This universe, those grandiose spheres, well, our world, if you will remember, is made up of the 7 days of creation. Remember I said that day 7? Well, those are the 7 lower spheres. You got 3 upper spheres out there that we know nothing about. When we're created in the image of God, we're created in the image of the lowest 7. 8, 9, 10, ein lano shum ra'ayon beze bichlal. We have no idea about it at all. We cannot experience it. We cannot know it. We cannot know. Sierra, what are you doing back there? My darling daughter. All right? She's going nuts back there. But remember something else I shared with you? See the banging and all that? I've always shared with you something. Learn a lesson about creation that we're talking about. There is never such a thing as a distraction. Everything exists. It's part of the greater whole. So whatever she's doing back there, it's part of this natural law of things. And as such, it's got to go the order that it does. Sierra, chill out. Whatever. Let's get back to the pattern. We exist within the realm of the 7. And this is repeated all the time. The 7 is the image of, in quote, God, in which we are created. And the rabbi here makes a very profound point. He wants to give us an example of how this reality exists and why the 7 is so vital for us to understand. And he gives us what he calls a mashal, which is a story, an example. And he states, for example, there is a king. And this king has all the wealth, all the power, all the everything. And he exists high above in his great palace. And he wants to create a kingdom. So what does he do? He states, I am going to create my kingdom. But it's not appropriate for me as the king to actually physically go down there and like build bricks and do something. I'm going to job it out. I'm going to hire the plants. So what I'm going to do, according to his story here, I'm going to write out the plans. I'm going to write out the blueprints. And then I am going to give those blueprints into the hands of my faithful, trusted servant to execute the implementation of the actual creation. And he states here that he creates this, in quote, book of wisdom. That's what Rabbi Menachem here refers to it as. And then he chooses the smartest and wisest person in all of his kingdom. And he says in the language of our sages, quoting here from the Gemara and Baba Metzia, that the person is referred to as an adrikal. An adrikal is an architect. And the architect, he says, the king gives to him the book of wisdom that he wrote it. And now when this architect is implementing the plan from the book, everyone knew and understood that he was not acting on his own, but that he was reading the king's book and implementing its plan. That's the story as how it goes. And he gives a reference to like when it says in the Bible that Solomon built the temple. We all know Solomon actually physically didn't come off his throne and put the bricks one on top of the other. He instructed, he delegated. God delegated authority to the architect to create our world. What on earth does that metaphor mean? Now, let me tell you what it doesn't mean. Remember, we're dealing with a story. And a point that Rabbi Menachem, our author, makes, Rabbi Chaim Vital later makes, is that whenever we are mentioning stories, as Rabbi Chaim would say, we are l'shakech et ha'ozen, which means we're making something simple so that you and I can understand it within the context of our relevancy. So, there was the original king, God, and God's unknowable, unknowing self. And a point that's made very clear, and this gets really intense. We say that even the angels do not see God. Do you know what that means? If the angels don't see God, we have this mythology that when we die, we go to heaven, we go up the pearly gates, and there's this big throne, just like I see in all the TV shows and movies, and you got this big glowing guy sitting on the throne, and that's God. They go, hey God, hey man, what's happening? God says, how are you, blah, blah, blah. Ain't nothing like it. Sorry if I'm popping your bubbles. These are fantasies. Now, just let me address something here real quick. You have many stories today of NDE, near-death experiences, in which people have, unquote, died, and they go to the other world and they see things, and then they come back here and tell you like it is. We have had rabbis who have had these experiences, and they come back and tell it like it is. You certainly have no shortage of our Christian brothers and sisters who have had this experience. And everybody goes up, and everybody sees exactly what they're expecting to see. Really. But they write books about it, right? I remember this, I think it was a kid, passed away, a Christian kid, and had one of these near-death experiences, really passed away, died and came back, I guess. And he claims he went up and saw Yeshu. Blonde-haired and blue-eyed, looked just like you saw in all those paintings in the church. Well, that is not an experience of the actual reality, but of the perceived reality within the subjective context of the individual human mind. So therefore, when the Jewish individual has this experience, he sees something Jewish. When the Protestant Christian sees something, he sees something Protestant. And when the Catholic sees something, it's something Catholic. And I might add that the Muslim sees something Muslim, the Hindu sees something Hindu, and the Buddhist sees something Buddhist. They're all subjective and relative. And when you understand this within the context of psychological archetypes, within the context of the patterns of existence, then you don't get confused by these things, or for that matter, convinced that your subjective view is an objective one. Now, this is something very important for us to understand. we have this adrikal. This is a Gemara word, which means someone who is an architect. I say someone because that's the language of the metaphor. But there's not really someone. But as the later Kabbalah would say, that's actually from the Zohar. Zohar is the one that actually originated this. There are what we call different faces of God. And they refer to them in the Kabbalah as partsufim, sephirotic faces. And the big famous ones, of course, are the long face of God called Arich Anpin, corresponding to Keter, and the, in quote, short face of God called Zer Anpin, corresponding to Tiferet. And a point that's made very clear in our Kabbalah. You, like it says in the Bible, we are the children of the Lord our God. The Lord our God is Yud-Ke Vav-Ke, and that is Zer Anpin, the short face. It's not the long face. The face of God that exists in our perspective is Yud-Ke Vav-Ke, but there's a higher perspective. There is a higher reality. The other entities and the higher dimensional planes that exist here and elsewhere, they still exist within the context of the 7 dimensional realities, which we call the 7, correspond 7 days of creation, all that. And they only know of God within the context of the small face. And even they don't see the actual personage of God, because there is no such existence. The kavod, as we call it, is something higher. Now, beyond the 7 dimensions, we call them the 7 heavens. There's this 8th, 9th, and 10th, and they're called the hidden heavens. And when you go into books like 2nd Enoch, it makes reference to them and the like. How much of that is midrashic as opposed to real? Pretty much all of it. We don't know what's up there beyond. Now, we refer to these realms beyond as the world of Atzilut, the higher realms. There is Biriah and Yetzirah, the 4 realms in Kabbalah, Atzilut and Biriah, Yetzirah and Asiya, the 2 lower worlds of Yetzirah and Asiya. Those are dimensional planes when I use the word worlds. They're the 7. That's our reality. But the other planes called Biriah and Yetzirah and Atzilut, they exist outside of our universe of space-time as we know it. So if we were to ever, in quote, go there, everything would be different. That which we call God would be different. The name of God would be different. The experience of God would be different. And, as God revealed to Moses, remember the book of Exodus, Torah portion coming up soon for us to read, time here, no man can see the face of God and live. And this is what's important for us to understand. We don't know that, in quote, face of the king who's up there in the palace. We just know the book of wisdom that he gave us, the pattern in which he created the universe and says, this is the structure, this is how things are, and this is the plan you got to follow. We call that natural law. Natural law includes all the realms and domains of what we understand today as the natural and the supernatural, the physical and the metaphysical. We make those distinctions based upon the limitations of our understanding, but they're not real. Life, remember, begins with that little itsy bitsy little putrid drop, as the sages would call it. It embeds itself within the egg and it starts to grow, right? For those of you who know a little bit about biology, when there is the moment of coupling between the husband and the wife, I think it's about 300 million of the male sperm enter into the woman. And out of those 300 million, only one of them makes it to the egg and survives. That would be comparative to the entire population of the United States making a run at it and only one person surviving. That's pretty intense if you think about it. But that happens all the time. And that happens according to greater plans, according to a greater order. Our reality, which we know is our human experience, exists within an order of things. The order which we refer to symbolically as the Book of Wisdom, or the 7 days of creation. Oh, by the way, what is the Book of Wisdom? The Book of Wisdom, as it says from the Zohar, is none other than the Torah. It says in the Zohar, Parshat Ekev, Daf Ayin Gimel Amud Aleph, if I'm not mistaken, that the Kucha Berichu or Raita Kulan Had, the Torah and Hashem are one. Now, many of you might be aware of this teaching as it has been expressed in Christianity. And I use this point when I try to help our Christian brothers and sisters to understand why we Jews are not the dumb, blind, devil worshippers that unfortunately many of them think that we are. I explained that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That's John, all right? But I remind them, John was a Jew. John never studied Christianity, never read the Christian Bible. He was teaching Torah. Do you know that? In the beginning was the Torah, and the Torah was with God, and the Torah was God. That's this Book of Wisdom. It is said in our Midrash that God gazed into the Torah, and from the Torah created the world. And that is the importance of our Torah. Because the Torah is, remember something very clear, and I've written about this many a time. Where does the Torah come from? I should play that Jeopardy music while you're waiting for the answer. Where does the Torah come from? Answer, heaven. Okay. I don't care what you want to think about heaven. Just remember one thing. It's not of this earth. Heaven ain't here. Heaven is somewhere else. Maybe it's on another planet. Maybe it's in another dimension. You don't know, and you don't know. Okay? But heaven is, I know a lot of you don't like the word, extraterrestrial. And when I use the word, I'm not speaking about little green guys on flying saucers shooting ray guns, all right? Not the Roswell crash, those are the Shire from Hollow Earth, and they come from out there. But somewhere, Torah's not from here. It's extraterrestrial. And Midrash states that the angels were up in arms, that God was going to give humanity the Torah. Why? If the Torah is just what we read in the Bible, the 5 books of Moses, right? The 10 commandments, don't kill, don't steal, right? The Midrash, the story, says that Moses says to the angels, why are you objecting that we get the Torah? You don't kill, you don't steal, we need the commandments, you don't. Well, that's a nice moralistic teaching, but there was more to it than that. You see, those entities above, remember this Torah? It's the blueprints. It came from a higher dimensional plane outside of this 7-dimensional reality which we understand as the heavens and the earth. It came from outside. They wanted it because they knew that the original, what we call primordial Torah, concealed within it the blueprints of everything. And they wanted that for themselves. They want to understand. They are the ones, like it says in the Bible, who call every day, Ayemim kol mikivodo la'aritzo. Where is the place of this glory? The source of all things, that we may, praise it. Even the Malachim ask that. Now, you understand why, when the plan was to give this knowledge to humanity, well, in all due respect, if you look in the Torah, what do you see when you read the Torah? Okay? To give you a time statement, we are in the Torah portion of Terumah, which deals with the charity contributions that the children of Israel make in the book of Exodus to build the tabernacle and the Ark of Covenant. And it's, let's be blunt, a bunch of boring instructions and regulations. What do I care that the Ark had this side and that side? It was this size, and the beams were this size. What do I care? I want something relevant to me. What do I care how big a building was 3,500 years ago? Yawn. A teaching from the Zohar in the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, which states, if all there was to our Torah was its simplistic stories as we read them today, we could write a better one ourselves. But even the likes of Sir Isaac Newton, he recognized, spent his whole life searching. He knew the codes were there. And the codes are not necessarily the Bible codes, the likes of which we see made popular today. There are levels and strata within our Torah which reflect the book of wisdom, the laws of nature, the parameters of all things in existence. And this is why Pirkei Avot, one of the great sages, whose name is never given, it's a code name, he says, Hafuch ba v'hafuch ba dokula ba. Flip it, hafuch. Turn it upside down. Turn it upside down. Everything's in it. You see, when we look at the Torah today, we forget how to look beyond the surface. We have to look, what we say, in between the lines. We know from our rabbis that there are what we call 4 levels of understanding the Torah. Pshat, Remez, Drash, Sod. What that means is the simplistic method, just read what the words say. And then there, of course, the hinted or implied meanings. And then we can embellish and tell moralistic tales. And then there are the secrets. Excuse me. Whew. Something in the throat there. So, the secrets, well, we all know what the secrets are today. It's the metaphysics that we all study and know from Zohar and the Ketuvei Ari. You ain't even touching the surface. That's all lovely stuff. But when you go into the experiential schools and you actually meet and greet these other entities who are out there, the good ones and the bad ones, you start to see things and you recognize that the image of man in which you are created, my goodness, we know so little. You get to see bigger and grander experiences of reality. You understand greater access and recesses of the human mind and consciousness. And you come to see the truth. And you recognize that the reality in which we live isn't so much of a reality at all. But just to think that you go off into some higher astral realm and have some experience, you've experienced God. You know nothing about what the experience is. The Torah is this book of wisdom, which is the foundation of our reality. That is the Torah that dictates to that little putrid seed. Inside you have DNA, and the DNA is going to meet with the DNA of the egg and the male and the female DNA. It only works like that, They're going to meet. Then you can have overlapping of the DNA, right? Study biology and chemistry. How curious. Of all the different possibilities, they never accidentally or intentionally recreate identically even once. Very interesting. But that's ingrained, programmed into the pattern. And the pattern is very grand, far beyond what our human intelligence is able to understand. And that is why science should never ever end with a period or an exclamation mark, but rather always with a comma, ready to continue. Whatever we think we know will change with more knowledge to come. We are going through a period of human arrogance, wherein which we think we are masters of our world. And I've seen it echoed in science fiction movies. I remember one, which was the remake of the 1951, I think it was 51, Michael Rene movie. What was the name of that movie again? I forgot. It just slipped my mind. He comes down there to tell mankind, you got to get your act together. They remade the movie with Keanu Reeves. And he comes down, lands his big flying saucer in Central Park. It's a big globe. And they take him in, and the question was, he says, I came here to save the world. And he says, you came here, and they asked him, you came here to save the world for us? He says, no, I came here to save the world from you. Because he came here to represent the earth and to judge those who are acting against it. Now, that was a very interesting concept for a movie, certainly absent from the first movie. What the heck was that name of that Michael Renee film? Somebody, you go write it here in text. That's what happens when you get to be an old man. Sometimes it slips the mind. So if somebody's interested in the donation for the shirt that I see here in text, remember it's not for sale. It's available only for $180 donation to our Kosher Torah school. Check out our emails. If you're on our email list, there's all the instructions and information there. It's there for the day the earth stood still. There we go. Thank you very much. Klatu Barada Nikto to you too. Thank you. Anyway, always have my fact checker out there, so we stay kosher. Anyway, getting back to the point. The reason why we focus on creation and all this stuff and the concept of these spheres, these igulim, they're boundaries. Boundaries define rule. Rule defines law. And being that it's created by the lawgiver, that's natural law. Natural law is the source of our Torah laws. And this is why our Torah laws are so vital for observance. Now, the laws as they are applicable within the context of the religion of Judaism are fine and good for Jews. If you're a Jewish person and you wish to experience the wisdom of the greater pattern, then you embrace the archetypes of the mitzvot, you fulfill them in our Orthodox Torah standard, and then you delve into their meanings, and you will discover through experience the greater realities therein. But for those of us who are not, those of you who are not Jewish, you're not practitioners of our Torah, it's okay. Study them anyway. Learn their secrets. There is a way to act things out, and there is still a way where you can learn them. For example, the Sabbath. I am asked many a time by non-Jewish people, groups usually they could refer to themselves as the Noahites, can you observe the Sabbath? I'm surprised by the question. Of course you can observe the Sabbath. If you remember, there are two reasons why we observe the Sabbath. One, it says, in remembrance of the going forth from Egypt. Well, that's usually applicable to Jews and Judaism. And there is a Jewish way to observe the Sabbath with regards within the context of the Jewish religion. But originally it said Zecher L'Maaseh Bereshit, in remembrance of creation. Why do we remember rest in creation? Because there's a necessity of balance. We see it, whether you like it or not, every day and night. Day and night, same parts of the day. And the day and the night, like the yin and the yang, like the ma and the ben, are two parts of the greater whole. And as such, just as this is the reality, this is natural law. And natural law dictates to us that there is activity and there is rest. Normally, for us human beings, we work by day and rest by night. That's normal. Not everyone is like that, but most people are. Okay, fine. But this is the way. As such, we have days of activity and a day of rest. Think about it. It said God created the world in 6 days. Really 7 if you want to include the Shabbat. What's that all about? I mean, God's the magical creator. Why is he just, world, everything's there? Would it taken a second? What's he have to bother? I mean, did God really build the building blocks? Is this like Lego? What did they do? What did he has to do? 6 days and he has to rest? What he's in the divine labor? He's into the divine union? At 6 o'clock they close shop and you can't work until the next day? Let's stop the silliness. The Torah story is revealing to us profound concepts of not God, but our humanity. It's a reflection of us. And because we perceive reality within the context of our humanity, and our humanity dictates to us activity and rest, so, in our life, we rest 1 day out of the 7. And what kind of activity do we rest from? If you're not Jewish and you're not a practitioner of rabbinic Judaism, then the nature of those activities, those prohibitions and the like, are irrelevant. If you want to embrace them as an expression of solidarity with Orthodox Jewish religion, I guess you could do that. I don't know why you'd want to, but you can. Thank you for your identity with us. But don't ever think that this is like obligatory or more spiritual or more holy, because it's just not. But that doesn't mean you don't rest. That on that 7th day, beginning at sunset on Friday through sunset Saturday, disconnect from the activity and balance within the concentric spheres, which is the reality of our existence. You see, this is why we always start with a discussion about creation. Because we need to put our lives into context. I don't care what happened billions, millions, or just 5,782 plus 165 years ago. What do I care? God created the world in 6 days. Gesundheit. Nice. I don't care what he created. 6 or 60. All right. The day of the Lord is like 1,000 years. So creation was 6 days of 1,000 years of peace. Mazel tov. You go into Rabbi Yitzhak of Akko and his calculations, which Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan brings down in his book, the Age of the Universe kind of stuff. It's available. It's out there. You'll see that according to his calculations, by our standards, the universe is 10 billion plus years old. What modern science says about the Big Bang. But remember something about the Big Bang. Big Bang's only the creation of this universe, the universe of the 7. Other universes existed before our Big Bang. And they're still there, around us, like the spheres. Reb Chaim later refers to what we call, again, the columns inside the spheres. Remember, this is all symbolic talk. Because he's talking about the human experience within the natural world. And that's what we need to focus on. So rather than get abstract, metaphysical, supernatural, into the realm of fantasy and speculation, the right way to do things, the prophetic way, is to get down. This is why the Merkabah experience is never called an ascent going up. It's always referred to as a descent going down. Going down into our reality. Going down into our humanity. Experiencing the greater world around us as God set it up to operate. So if you want to know what's right and wrong, if you want to know what's good and evil, it is not decided by public opinion. It is not decided by the gods of social media. It is not decided by the lords of government and legislation. It is decided by natural law. And if you don't know natural law, then you will not know the Torah. And if you don't know the Torah as the laws, you will never know the lawgiver. And as much as we will ever know in our humanity, we will only know the small face. So if someone wants to come and say, well, I know the greater face, blah, blah, blah. Thank you. I always hear people that they're talking to God, they're talking to the aliens. This one's a prophet. This one's blah, blah. I hear it all the time. I get all the stuff. If you were to come into my office on a regular basis and see who contacts me, I am regularly contacted by various archangels, numerous different gods, half a dozen different messiahs and Elijahs all the time. And yeah, I'm being facetious, but you got a lot of people out there who unfortunately crack under the pressures of reality and embrace delusions. It's a sad thing. And I try to work with them, I deal with the counseling and stuff. But, a lot of people just, they're lost. I don't know what to say. It's very, very frustrating. But you don't have to be. Understand the pattern, right? Understand where we all come from. Understand and look at human growth. How we start from that little itsy bitsy thing that if you look at it and say, gee whiz, that's Einstein. That's Tesla. That's Moshe. That's Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. That's everybody. And everything that came out of them. Wow. Well, I don't see how the heck that little drop, where is all that stuff in there? It's there. Oh, yes, it is. And the sperm meets the egg, it starts the cellular growth becomes the fetus becomes the baby is born, and then grows according to the pattern. And the pattern includes the expansion of consciousness. Sometimes we get retarded along the way and we thwart growth. Got to get rid of that stuff. Like I've always said, there are always distractions along the way, and I refuse to accept distractions. I think they're part and parcel of the whole, and you just got to go with the flow, right? So like moments ago, remember Sierra was acting up back there. That's what she does. She's dog consciousness. She's not thinking that there is a class. She doesn't understand that concept. All she knows is she's got to scratch, she's got to move, she's got to do this. That's all she is. I'm okay with her being in her reality. I'm okay with us being in our reality. I'm okay with the malachim, the angels, being in their reality. These are all the individual spheres along the way. If I want to expand consciousness, then I got to know each and every sphere. I got to know the doggy sphere, the human sphere, the angelic sphere, and as far out as I can go, or as far down as I can get. This is why we understand this material, and this is why or how we put it into practice. So with that, let's conclude for tonight. And Be'ezrat Hashem, I hope, God be willing, think about these things of how you can implement. Find the pattern in your personal life and walk that pattern. All right? Find your path and stay true to it. Understand and know natural law. Embrace it and be one with it. Because in this you will find your truth. Alrighty, let's conclude on that note. God be willing, we'll pick up with the words of our Ochel Moed book in our next class. Ariel Bar Tzadok here from the Kosher Torah School. Thanking you again. Please support our school for a donation of $180. Again, check out our email and get one of our Kosher Torah School t-shirts here. And got other good stuff hopefully coming your way. So check out our stuff on YouTube, continued posts on Facebook, and of course our email list. Go to koshertorah.com and check out our stuff and more good stuff to come. Check out our books on Amazon. And thank you again for all of your support. And remember, it's because you're here for me that I can be here for you. All right, guys, signing off. I'll see you all next time. Shalom.